Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. This time out, we're looking at the next generation guitar synthesizer from Boss. Let's get started. Today we're looking at the GM-800 guitar and bass synthesizer system from Boss. Now this is the latest generation, the next generation of Boss's efforts into the guitar synthesizer, the bass synthesizer realm. They've been doing this since 1977, so they've certainly brought a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom to bear onto this new device, and it's incredible. It really serves 5 functions in my mind. First of all, it's a guitar and bass synthesizer that you play from your instrument, obviously. But it also has a USB port. The USB port allows you to record audio directly into your DAW if you like, but you can also use this as a USB controller over MIDI to run your virtual instruments inside your DAW. Very cool for recording parts. You could also use that for entering notation into something like Sibelius or Finale or Dorico or something like that, so you could create charts very easily. We also have 5-pin MIDI, so this can control external 5-pin MIDI hardware synthesizers, or vice versa. You could use this as a sound module, playing sounds from another 5-pin synthesizer. So it's a very versatile device that has a lot of uses in the studio as well as on the stage. There are 3 components to the system. Everything starts with a divided pickup that goes on your guitar. I've got a custom shop Strat here that the Sweetwater Guitar Shop put a new neck on for me. But the pickup mounts here, very easy. In fact, I didn't even fuss with it. I just basically took some double-sided tape, stuck it onto the pick guard, slipped on the little controller box here, which has a very versatile mount. It'll work with pretty much any guitar. It just slips right onto the guitar strap pin. Then we've got a cable. This is a serial GK cable. Now that's not a regular audio cable. It's actually a TRS cable, but it's a twisted pair cable, more like an Ethernet digital cable. So it's a special cable, even though it may look like an audio cable, and that goes between the GK5 pickup system and into the GM-800, which is actually the brains of the operation. The sound engine is based on Roland's Zen-Core technology. Now this is the same technology that's in the Juno X synthesizer, the Fantom series of workstations, as well as other boxes from Roland. Fantastic sounding system, and it works by combining PCM along with advanced modeling. This makes it super versatile. As you'll hear, there are tons of different sounds here and a lot of effect support as well, so we have a lot of sound shaping capability here. Now, a big part of this whole thing is that it's actually a digital system at this point. We've got the GK5 pickup, but there's DSP-based tracking going on here. It makes the tracking really fast and really comfortable for a guitar player. It feels like you're playing your instrument. Now, of course, you have to adapt to the sounds that you're using. If you have a sound with a slow attack, it's obviously not going to respond to tremolo picking, for example. But if you have something with a fast attack, it'll certainly respond to all of your regular guitar techniques, whether you're picking, hammering on, bending, using the whammy bar, so even some of those guitaristic techniques where you're bending some strings and not bending others, they all work with the GM-800. Now, as I mentioned, we have a couple of different ways we can use this. First of all, we have stereo analog outputs, which is what you're hearing in this video. It's going straight into Pro Tools. We also have a USB port. That USB port can carry audio in and out of the computer, or it can carry MIDI in and out of the computer as well, as we'll see in just a little bit. So we can record directly into your DAW. Very handy for the studio. We also have MIDI connections on this, as I mentioned, 5-pin MIDI. Again, that's in and out, so we can control this via MIDI, or we can control other devices via MIDI. Makes it very versatile in the studio. Now the other connections on the back panel are two control ports. Now those support either two foot switches in each one or an expression pedal in each one. So you can have any combination of those. We could have two foot switches in one jack, an expression pedal in the other. We could have two expression pedals, four total foot switches, whatever you want. And that combines with the two foot switches that are on the front here, labeled Control 1 and Control 2. All of those, whether expression pedals, whether the onboard control switches, whether foot switches, they're all assignable to any number of different parameters, so you can take a lot of foot-on control over what's happening with the GM-800 if you're using this on a pedal board for live performance or in the studio. The other connections on the back panel include an input for that serial GK cable that we talked about, and there's also a pass-through for that, so you could run that on to control another device that supports the serial GK system. As far as the sound engine goes, the architecture in the GM-800 is built around what are called scenes, and that's sort of the overarching preset, if you will, that combines everything together. There are 150 scenes available. 100 of those have factory settings in them, and 50 are available for user settings. Now, each scene can consist of up to 4 parts. And each of those parts loads a tone. The tones are the actual sounds that you work with, like a tone could be a piano, or a tone could be a synthesizer sound, or a drum sound, or whatever it might be. So you can combine 4 of those together to create a scene. We also have a ton of effects processing power available within that architecture. So we have overall effects that can be applied on a scene level that'll affect all 4 of the parts at once. And each part also has its own individual effects. There are 90 different effects types on board, plus on the master outputs, we have master compression and master EQ as well, and all that's savable per scene. We also have a ton of editing control over each of our sounds. If we select a part, we'll call up the tone. This is where you can select the sound that's assigned to the part. We have tone modify, so if we scroll over to that, you can see the parameters here. We can page through those, lots of different shaping. Here's our effects control here. Here's where we can assign things to different strings on the guitar. So we can have an individual sound on each of the strings. We can also have individual sounds within different fret ranges as well. So all that's assignable on a per part basis. There's so much editing capability here. We'll take a little bit closer look at that when we jump over to the Boss Tone Studio for GM-800, which allows us to edit on our computer. It's a little easier to see that on screen, but everything is accessible right here on the main screen of the GM-800. When you're finished, hit exit. You'll jump back out to the preset level. Of course, you can save as well. We have a menu here that gives us access to all the master parameters, assigning controllers, and so on. So very easy to get around. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned is that there's an additional part as well per scene, and that's under this R button here. That's rhythm, and it allows you to have percussion and drum sounds. There are tons of different drum sounds here, electronic, acoustic as well, that you can either incorporate into your patches or access independently. Moving through your presets is very easy. We have preset up, down, foot switches here. We also have a select button that'll allow us to scroll through, and that's how you select your parameters and so on as well. Master output level. So a very simple box to get around on, but man, does it have a ton of power on board. One other thing I want to mention with the GM-800 is that it has so much processing power on board that you can actually have the last preset continue to ring when you move on to the next preset. So you aren't cutting anything off. There's no glitches as you change from preset to preset. Now let's take a quick look at the Boss Tone Studio for GM-800, which is a software app that allows you to access all the settings in the GM-800 via USB. Now you can see here that when you look at the screen, this is our overall view of the scene right here on our screen. We've got our 4 parts that make up this particular sound, plus our rhythm part. In this case, that's turned off. And then we have our master settings for each of the parts. Now, if we click the master button, we've got the overall settings for the scene, the overall volume level, for example, if we're locking it to tempo, and so on. So everything's laid out right here. We can also access some of the settings for controlling. So control assign is here. We can look at our different control switches and assign them to different functions. We have librarian functions here, so you can create sets if you have different gigs or different studio sessions that you're working on. From here we can also access Roland's Tone Central in the cloud, and from here you can download sound packs and wave expansions and so on. You can access the tuner from here. Click on that, we can see all 6 strings. It's also on the screen of the GM-800. And we can also set the tuning frequency overall for this, and you can also access different tunings if you want to work in drop D or whatever. The tuner can be set up to support all of those. Under menu, we have some of the master settings, or the overall settings for the entire system. So whether that's knob settings, here's where you set up the GK tuner. We have input-output settings and so on. Down here, though, is a couple we want to look at. One is USB audio. This allows us to route audio straight out of the GM-800 via USB into your DAW. Very handy for recording parts. And as I mentioned, we can also use that USB connection to carry MIDI and control virtual instruments. I've got a software instrument loaded up here in Studio One. This is Contact from Native Instruments with the Ethereal Earth instrument. So I'm playing that by MIDI, which is converted by the GM-800, sent over USB into my computer. This makes this a great studio tool for recording parts into your songs. You could also use this to record MIDI parts into a notation program, like Sibelius, Dorico, or Finale, to create charts very easily. So I think it's fairly obvious here that this is a really versatile guitar synthesizer. Fantastic on stage as an instrument because it's so deep, it allows you so much sound control, so much versatility for creating sounds, and very easy to set up and control from your guitar or your bass. But it also can serve as a great recording tool over USB, over MIDI, or simply connecting up the analog outputs to the input of your audio interface. And one other question that I'm sure is going to come up is this compatible with older Roland 13-pin systems? There will be 2 optional boxes, the GKC-AD and the GKC-DA, that will allow you to convert 13-pin to either control the GM-800 or vice versa, have the GM-800 control your 13-pin devices. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the GM-800. This is such a deep box, we could keep going and going and going, but I think you're getting the idea. Tons of sounds, tons of capability, super versatile. I can definitely see having this sitting on my desk in my studio, using it for entering parts, for playing parts, for controlling MIDI devices. Very versatile that way. Then take it out to the gig, use it for sounds there as well. Roland has definitely leveled up the guitar synthesizer with the GM-800. You're definitely going to want to check this one out. If you have questions about the GM-800, head over to sweetwater.com. You'll find full information there, or better yet, contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. They can give you an in-depth tour, answer all your questions, and tell you how the GM-800 can be a tremendous asset to your studio or live rig. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater.